Hello students, this is Mr. Quigley speaking on behalf of all the guidance counselors and should be addressing juniors and sophomore students. And the topic today is getting ready to take the PSAT exam. Now, as you all know, we've got that coming up on October 16th. Teachers, if you would, while I'm doing this presentation, I'd like you to hand out some materials. For the sophomores, you're going to hand out this Learn More booklet to all the students, and then also the PSAT booklet. So one of those will go to each student. And for the juniors, you're going to hand out the Indiana Next booklet and once again one of the PSAT booklets. So teachers, if you'd go ahead and distribute those at this point in time, and then I'm going to start speaking with your students. First of all, I think as we all know, on October 16th you're going to be taking the PSAT exam. And you'll be doing it with your advisory teacher. Some of you will be in the same advisory rooms, some will be in a different room, but you'll be given that information later on where you're supposed to be reporting to a room. So on Thursdays, we give the student let's start that over. On October 16th, which is a Wednesday, you'll be taking the PSAT exam. You do have an alternative if you want to take the ASVAB, that's the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test. If you'll have your parent email your guidance counselor and tell them you want to take the ASVAB test, the Armed Services test, instead of PSAT, we can make arrangements for that. The PSAT is a practice test. It's a practice test to get ready for taking exams like the SAT. Now, why is this important? Well, there's a couple of different things. First of all, I know a lot of you students that are juniors to be seniors next year want to take higher ed and dual credit courses. Those are the classes that you can take where you get credit at college and credit in high school. If you have your PSAT results and they're high enough, you can get directly admitted into some of these colleges without having to go through taking an SAT or an ACT. So for the higher ed dual credit purposes, if you score well enough on your PSAT exam, that score can be used for your application for higher ed. So that's a really good reason to be spending a lot of time on this. The second one, we all know practice makes perfect. If I want to get better on a particular video game, the more I play it, the better I'm going to get. Well, the more SAT or ACT exams I can take, the better I'm going to get. And why are SATs and ACT exams important? Because those are part of the process in being admitted to college. As you apply, beginning of your senior year to college, they're going to look at three major factors. They're going to look at the coursework that you took. So how difficult was your coursework at Homestead High School? They're going to say, what's your grade point average? And the third thing they're going to look at is your SAT or ACT exams. So again, this PSAT is a great practice for that. For some of the juniors, this is also not just the PSAT, but it's what's called NMSQT. That's the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. The National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test gets you into the National Merit Program, which is the largest scholarship program in the United States. And so based on how well you do on this PSAT, now this is for the juniors, how well you do on the PSAT will tell you whether you qualify. Over the last 2 years, we've had 14 students from Homestead get into the National Merit Program. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of students. So there's some of you out there right now that's going to work for. So the PSAT is very important for that. But again, mainly for everybody. This is just a practice for the SAT, and also your scores can be used to help you get into dual credit courses your senior year. What do you want to do? When we get to the PSAT test on October 16th, you're going to want to have a couple of pencils with you. You're going to need to bring an approved calculator, and you have to know what your email address is. So we're going to kind of get more into the nuts and bolts of this program. I'm going to look at the prep booklet now, so you might want to get that one out if you would, please. On the purple side, I think sometimes on the cameras it shows up brown, but on this purple or brown side, this is information about the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. If you want a lot of information in there, read about that. But for most everybody else, we're going to be looking at the PSAT side, the blue side here. So I'm going to open up pages and kind of just do a quick overview with you about the PSAT test. I'm going to go first of all to page 3. Some things to know about the PSAT. What should I bring? I mentioned a calculator's on there. And it also tells you in here that if you go to page 17, they'll tell you which calculators you can use. Talked about number 2 pencils and things like that. There's a statement in here about fees. Don't worry about fees. The fees have already been paid. For some of you, the state of Indiana paid for it. For some of you, your parents paid for that with your school fees. But you don't have to worry about bringing any money to the PSAT exam. There's a place down here about college majors. And when we get ready to take the October 16th PSAT test, you're going to have to identify a college major. So there's some information here that you want to hit and touch on before we get to this testing thing. Just want to remind you, practice makes perfect. It's very important to do this. So on the PSAT test, it's going to have three main components. One's a critical reading, one's a writing, and one's a math. So I want to look at, I'm going to jump all the way up to page 8. If you do that with me, you can see in the booklet on page 8, there's some information about what is critical reading. And then if you look at pages 9 through 16, there are sample questions. So it gives you an example of things that are going to be asked of you next October 16th when we take this test. Same thing if you move to page 17. I'm going to go to page 17 right now, so please do that with your booklet. Talks about the math section. What type of questions are asked on the math section, whether they're open-ended, whether they're multiple choice. So this is a really good thing for you to be looking at on page 17, and then again on pages 18 to 28, the next following pages are samples of PSAT and SAT math questions. And then of course on page 29, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to jump ahead. Sorry I didn't mark it ahead of time, so I have to scroll through just like you. On page 29, it starts talking about the writing test. What are the type of things that are going to be on the writing section? And then the pages immediately following that are samples of the writing. Finally, when you opened up to page 29, you might have noticed that there was a little handout in there. I'm going to bring that out. That's even a practice for the PSAT. It's an entire practice PSAT exam with, on the very back, the answer guide. Now that's not, on October 16th, you're not going to get the answer guide, obviously, but this is something that you can be reviewing now to be looking at how am I doing on PSAT, critical reading, writing, mathematics. So you've got a really good answer guide there along with practice tests. So let's kind of review real quick here. We only wanted this presentation to go to only go maybe 10 minutes for you. We're going to take the PSAT on October 16th. You're going to be doing it with your advisory teacher. It will start right at 7:45, so you can't be late that day. We're going to roll right into the test, and we're going to test up until about 11 o'clock. Now, so that you know, we don't have the exact schedule set, but after we're done with the PSAT, then we go to periods 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and each class is about 12 minutes in length. There'll be one of those classes that'll be set aside for lunchtime period, but they'll be about 12 minutes in length, and we will go through all 7 periods. I want to remind you about that ASVAB. That's that Armed Services Vocational Test. If you want to do that, you may not just come in and sign up for it. Your parent has to email your guidance counselor, and that has to be done by October 9th. So if you want to take that Armed Services test instead of the PSAT, you need to take care of that. Tonight, go home and talk to your parent about that if you want to. Really, really, really highly recommend over the next 2 weeks you get into this booklet. Take a look at it. Take a look at the sample questions. See how you're doing on it. Take that sample exam that we showed you before. This is an excellent source for you to get ready for the PSAT. Also, by the end of, or the middle of next week, this video will be loaded on the SACS website. So if your parent wants to view it, get the information. If you want to go back over the information, you can go there. I'd like to address the teachers at this point. We're reminding that you will be administering the PSAT on October 16th in your room with your advisory students. I will be giving you directions on that day, so you'll have to get into on your television monitor, and it's simply you'll be handing out the materials, and then I'll be giving the directions to the students. Mrs. Bay needs to be contacted if you feel that your room is not appropriate for testing. She is assigning testing rooms. So many of you will be in your normal advisory room, but if you feel that you're in a room that's not appropriate for testing, you need to send an email to her. That also brings up another point. We are going to be moving some advisory rooms around on that day, but Mrs. Bay is coordinating that, and she will let you know. So teachers, before the advisory on October 10th, that's the last advisory before the PSAT, you'll be notified if your room is changing. And then what we want you to do is we want you to go back to your advisory group and say, okay, students, we are testing in this room, or we have been moved to this room. Make sure you all know where that is for the October 16th PSAT. So if you have any questions about room assignments, you can talk to Mrs. Bay. Finally, there is no makeup for this, so don't come in late, don't miss that day and come in and say, well, I'd like to do the makeup for the PSAT. There is no makeup, so you want to be here on time. And then teachers, if you have a student who is not here today for advisory, I'd ask you to please put their name on the blue right up top here, turn it back into student services, and then Mrs. Fitt will get the materials to that student. So that's about it. Good luck on PSAT day. If you have any questions, you can talk to Mrs. Fitt, myself. If you have questions about the room assignments, contact Mrs. Bay. Thank you, everybody, for your attention.